for a while, I was going to read from The Killer's Game, which I'm really proud of. It's a movie now, and it's streaming on Amazon. So if you haven't seen it, I recommend it. It's hilarious. Okay, so and the first time I read from that book was at Twilight Tales, thanks to that wonderful person over there, Tina. So I'll be introducing her in a minute. So I was going to read from that, but I called an audible because of the horrendous events of the last week and a half or so. And I think when I read this excerpt from this other book, you'll understand why I'm reading from this other book. This is an excerpt from a novel called Oblivion. And some of you might understand where I'm coming from already if you've heard me. I might have read this in public before, maybe a Tina's series. But I think it'll make sense when you get to the end of the excerpt. So basically the story in this book, and where I'm picking it up, is it's told in first person by a aging, lonely, alcoholic former priest. And he was defrocked for bungling an exorcism. And on one snowy night, he's staggering down Clark Street in Chicago when he's approached by this good-looking, well-dressed young man named Dodd, who is a corporate lawyer, and he also turns out to be a former altar boy of this disgraced priest. So they go and they sit down and they have a drink at a bar, and Dodd says to Father Delaney, is his name, I need a huge favor, okay? I have my most important client owns this beautiful big mansion in the deep south, and there's something rotten inside it, and it's dark, evil presence, and I need someone to cleanse it. And the reason I'm coming to you, Father, is I need it done completely in secrecy. I need it completely anonymous. The owners want to remain completely anonymous, so you'll have to wear a blindfold if you do it when we fly you down there. And, of course, the priest is reluctant, but he does understand he has to do it for his soul, for his atonement. So he agrees to do it. So they fly him down there on the plane, blind, with the blindfold on. They chauffeur him out to this mansion, okay, and he's not allowed to take his blindfold off until he's inside the mansion in a room. And that's where I pick it up, okay? And it goes something like this, told in his first person point of view. 1, the opposite of human. The room was calling out to me. That's the only way I can explain it. It was calling out to me in some inhuman tongue, and I was blinking and squinting, my eyes watering, struggling to see through the bone-white light. Well, I almost collapsed right then from the dizziness, but Dodd steadied me by grasping me by the shoulders. I remember wiping my eyes, trying to take in the whole room. On the surface, it wasn't much more than a gentleman's study, decorated in conservative French provincial, nice, tidy, nothing extravagant. The wainscoted walls were painted white with crown moldings all around, and shelves brimming with old volumes, reference books, classics. There was a jeweled chandelier overhead and a round mahogany table in the center on a colorful Persian rug. There were also fresh flowers in expensive vases, carnations and lilies and bright salmon pinks and yellows. It was all very, very tasteful, staid, rich, very old money. But I knew immediately there was another dimension to this room, a dimension just beneath the surface. I had felt this kind of presence before in the Robert Taylor homes, and also on a trip I took with the Catholic missionaries to Auschwitz. It was the opposite of sound, the opposite of light. Like I said, the opposite of human. It was like a silent black depth charge erupting in my brain, calling out in waves, crashing against my soul. hate. I doubled over suddenly as though punched in the gut, but Dodd steadied me. What? Are you okay, Father? You all right? Dear God. Dear God. That was about all I could manage. What is it? Dodd was asking me. I have to leave this place, I managed to utter. What are you talking about? I have to leave. What is it? Father, Dodd sounded irritated now. What's going on? I tried to explain to him, but before I could get any more words out, another silent blast struck me like a hard jab to the ribs, and I reeled backward, and then as I gazed up at that tasteful decor, I swear to the Lord, I saw the surfaces of the room peeling away like black photographic negatives curling under intense heat. In my mind's eye, the walls were wavering in and out of focus, and I knew what was happening. I knew precisely what was going on. The true nature of that room was revealing itself, like the skin of a snake peeling away, and underneath was a cancer, like a sediment of human suffering distilled into rotting, diseased parchment. Father, talk to me, Dodd was saying, his voice coming from a million light years away. What is it? What's wrong? I got it. Then the odor struck me, choking the words out of my throat. I fell to my knees, flailing at the air like I was sparring with the devil, but my gestures were futile. The smell permeated everything now, and it was that old familiar odor that I would never forget as long as I lived. The odor of bestiality, of sickness, of death, but this time stronger than ever before. It's like I could smell it with my nerve endings, with my pores, with my eyes, and with my ears. Hate, 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 hate. Father, what are you doing? Before I knew what was happening, I was crawling toward the door. I was murmuring litanies on the way. God of heaven, God of earth, God of angels, God of archangels. Father, wait! Somehow I told him I had to get out of there. I had to leave this place. I reached the door and clawed at the knob, my sweat-slicked fingers fumbling with it. Something was coalescing behind me, something from the shadows, something huge and malignant. But before it could reach out for me, I got the door open and I careened out into the corridor. And there I collapsed under the hardwood. Father, wait a second, the blindfold! Dodd was rushing toward me. The blindfold, put it back on! I rose to my knees and I vomited. It roared out of me and spattered across an oriental carpet runner and a length of varnished baseboard. Dodd appeared behind me, reached down, tried to help me up, but I was heaving with involuntary spasms now. It was awful. The bile was acid hot in my throat, and I nearly choked on it. Eventually, I vomited out the last of my stomach acids, and I collapsed on my side. Dodd knelt down beside me, patting my back, whispering, "Padre, you okay? Padre." I think I uttered something like, "Yeah, peachy," and wiped my mouth, getting my bearings. I heard footsteps coming down a corridor, fast and furious, rushing toward us. "We got to get moving," Dodd said grimly. At that point, I looked up and I saw the girl. She had come suddenly around the corner, a skinny little waif in a black leather jacket, torn leggings, and big black army boots, like some pint-sized stormtrooper approaching cautiously. She seemed to take in the entire scene all at once with her big, intelligent eyes, but she didn't say anything at first. Just stood there with hands on hips, suspicious, wired. She wore a Public Enemy t-shirt underneath her jacket, and her bottle blonde hair was buzz cut along one side, a streak of lime green down one tendril on the other. I blinked. I blinked again. Even in the throes of my nausea and fear, I felt something strange as I made eye contact with this girl. An odd connection. Did I know her from somewhere? She looked so familiar. Was she famous? The girl took another step toward us. Who puked? She said, pointing toward the rug. Melissa, please, Dodd said urgently. Go back to your room. The girl put her hands back on her hips. Fuck you too, James. You guys have really bad timing. Dodd stared at her. What's the matter? Burke is on his way. Burke? Dodd seemed frozen at the mention of the name. Yeah, he somehow found out about your little visit, the girl went on. He's on his way right now with a couple of goons from the SS. Dodd wrestled me to my feet. The blindfold, Padre. Quick. Please, put the blindfold back on. The girl said, you can still beat him if you take the South Drive. Come on, Father. Dodd fumbled with the blindfold, pulling it back over my eyes. I was still reeling from my violent retching, and now I was blind again. And then we were moving, again, faster than before. I felt myself being hurtled back down the back corridor, back toward the shadows from which we had come. I could hear Dodd's anxious breathing right next to me, and I could feel my own heartbeat pulsing in my ears, and the girl's voice receding into the corridor behind us. Better hurry, guys. The brown shirts are coming. To Dark Heart. Despite my grogginess, it took us less than minutes to make it back through a labyrinth of hallways, stairwells, and anterooms. We would have made it even faster, but I tripped a couple of times, and then Dodd managed to take a wrong turn at the end of the central corridor. Eventually, we were scuttling along that familiar parquet hall again, heading toward the service door. Quick! Father, turn! Right here, immediately! Turn, now! I stumbled out through the door. The sudden wet wind on my face sent starbursts across my blinded vision and shivers up my spine. Though this was bracing, dizziness still hobbled me and my joints felt like ground glass. I started to stagger down the icy steps, Dodd's vice-like grip on my elbow pulling me along. Hold it! A voice pierced the silence behind us like a pistol shot. Presumably some security guard hollering at us from 100 yards away. He sounded more surprised than hostile. Keep moving, Father. Keep moving. Dodd was urging me onwards as fast as he could manage. Another voice. Dodd, hold on a second. Burke wants to see you. Then I heard Dodd's voice right beside me. Can't talk right now, boys. Family emergency. We had now reached the garage, or whatever it was, and I careened through the door, tripping on the threshold. We shuffled frantically along the cement floor, our huffing, puffing breaths echoing loudly, till finally we reached the vehicle we had arrived in. Dodd tore open the front passenger door and quickly shoved me inside. I banged my head against the door jamb, knocking my blindfold out of kilter. Now I could partially see through one eye, albeit blearily, as Dodd hopped behind the steering wheel and fired up the engine. All sorts of things began registering in my light-stricken eye. We were indeed in a garage, and it was drenched with fluorescent light and filled with similar cars, some of them unmarked, like cop cars maybe, and several black limousines, and the door at the far end was rising up, letting in a dull glow of overcast daylight. I blinked, wrestling with the blindfold. Finally, I tore it off, just as Dodd was pulling out through the exit. My senses were bombarded by the gale of snow lashing at the windshield. It made my eyes ache. I tried to focus on the stretch of icy road surface ahead of us, but now things were happening very quickly. Dodd was pushing the car as fast as it would go in such conditions, and veils of snow were obscuring nearly everything. I saw vague outlines of buildings in the middle distance and figures emerging from the trees on either side of the road ahead. They were dressed in identical dark parkas, wearing headsets and with automatic weapons cradled in their arms. By now, Dodd was cursing loudly, pedal right to the floor, and the Cadillac was swerving and sliding toward a huge wrought iron gate, and everything was starting to look vaguely familiar. And all at once, I realized why. Why Dot had been so secretive, and why there had been such a production number just to get me inside this place, and why we were now surrounded by men in identical parkas with identical AR-15s. The answer was right there, rising as large as life behind us. Viewed through the rear window and through a haze of windblown snow, the building had maybe lost some of its majesty, but it was still an awesome edifice. And apart from other buildings clustered nearby, it would have looked just like any other opulent plantation house you might see dotting the Virginia pastures in the 18th century. As our car skidded across the icy macadam toward the gates, the north portico came clearly into view behind us. Its breathtaking Doric columns rising 3 stories high, dominating a facade familiar from countless American tourist artifacts and even from the $20 bill. There, right behind us, like a lucid dream, loomed one of the most famous buildings in the world. The very same domicile I had just fled as though it were on fire. 55,000 square feet of history, the beating heart of the executive branch, cared for over the centuries like an aging dowager, festooned with greenery, wreaths, and twinkling lights during the holidays, Easter egg hunts for the kiddies in the spring, walk and talks with world leaders through the rose garden path. But inside it, deep down inside it, a dark heart was festering. Thank you.